Our favorite SMGs are getting nerfed, and it is a big deal. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down exactly what this nerf means and which SMGs you should be chasing in the new weapon meta. Stick around. What's up guys, it's Skill Up here with another Division video. Today we're going to be talking about the SMG nerf. It has happened, and it's happened large on our sort of favorite SMGs, the Vector and the AUG. They have both copped something, and so we're going to break down exactly what this means and how you'll need to respond to that in the sort of weapon meta going forward. So what is the deal? Well, basically since day dot, ever since forever, we've been using a Vector or an AUG as our primary weapons. There are a variety of reasons why this is the case, but ultimately it boils down to this. The Vector and AUG are part of the SMG weapon class, and that class of weapon is super effective due to its really high per bullet damage, its very quick reload speeds, its awesome stability, and also its sort of baked in crit. Crit is sort of baked into those weapons in a way that no other weapon receives. So the combination of all these things actually made the SMG class very strong, and within that class, the Vector and the AUG were extremely strong weapons to be running with. The reason for that is because they actually had disproportionately high scaling, and they had disproportionately high per bullet damage, right? So if you look at their sort of performance or their overall sort of per bullet damage versus other types of SMGs, they were statistical outliers. They were much stronger than the other types. Now, I'm not really sure why this is the case, to be honest with you. As I look at the numbers and the way they break down, I really couldn't tell you why it is that they had so much more damage than other SMGs when they had very similar reload times, mag speeds, and rates of fire. But that's what it was. It was that. So for that reason, we all gravitated towards the AUG and to the Vector. We thought they're the best ones to go for, and we were right. And absolutely, things like the MP5 or the MP7 were really nice choices as well, but they weren't as good as the AUG and the MP5. So Massive has essentially cottoned onto this, and they've said, cool, we're going to do two things. So firstly, we're changing the inherent benefit provided by an SMG, which is that base crit is no longer there. I'm sort of doing a separate video on that talks about that further. So I'm not going to talk about this now, but essentially this is sort of a nerf if you're not at the crit cap, and it's a buff if you actually are at the crit cap. But check out my other video if you're interested in more detail on that. And then secondly, they also said specific to the AUG and the Vector, they are going to be nerfing the base damage of those weapons by 10%. So what exactly does that mean in terms of the numbers? Well, here on screen, you can actually see a breakdown of all of the different types of SMGs in the game. You can see their damage rates at this sort of high-end spectrum, the 204 damage. And you can also see their damage scaling. Damage scaling is a complicated concept, but essentially it speaks to how much more damage your weapon will get per point of firearms. Okay, so that's not a linear amount of increase for each weapon type. Each weapon has a different amount of damage scaling inherent to it. And you'll see here that the AUG and the Vector actually have the highest per bullet damage, and they also have the highest damage scaling of any SMG in the game. So yeah, I mean that's obviously big, and what they've essentially done is they've knocked this down to by 10%. So that actually brings the Vector down to and the AUG down to 57.55 in terms of their per bullet damage. Now this does make them the second highest per bullet damage SMG type. The only other one that beats them is the T821, right? But it's very important to note that the rate of fire on a T821 is actually 550 RPM, 200 RPM slower than the AUG and the Vector. So that's a big deal. It's a much slower rate of fire. It does have a larger magazine size to complement that, but it's only got 7 more bullets than an AUG, which is not really a big deal. It has 12 more bullets than a Vector. So essentially, from this perspective, I'm going to say that the AUG and the Vector are still better than the black market, than the T821, even though the T821 has better per bullet damage. But I will say though that I do think we need to look a lot more at the MP7. The MP7 has a per bullet damage of 5620 at its base level, okay? And that's compared to 5755 for the Vector and AUG. So we're talking a difference of 100 bullets there. But what we are also talking about is that the MP7 fires at a rate of 950 RPM, which is around 200 RPM more than the other than the AUG and the Vector, right? So that's a really big deal. That rate of fire is huge. Yes, you are trading away some magazine size. So the magazine size on the MP7 is 20, and on the AUG it's 25. So 5 bullets lost there. And on the Vector, you'll see that the magazine size is actually the same, right? So all of this is by way of saying that in my personal view, I actually believe that the MP7 is now the best SMG in the game. It's a little bit more high risk because you empty your bullets really fast and that rate of fire, and unless you're lined up on your target and you're hitting them, you're going to find yourself reloading more often. But if you can land those bullets, right, if you land those shots, you are going to be unstoppable. And I would say in both PvE and PvP settings that the MP7 has now become the best, or the go-to SMG to run with. The MP5 is it's much lower in terms of per bullet damage. It does have a much nicer magazine size of 328, and it's got a very respectable 800 RPM, so it's a good all-rounder, I'd say. But yeah, essentially, I would still say that the MP7 is our weapon of choice to go with for the variety of encounters. And that's even considering the fact that the MP7 has the lowest damage scaling. It has a 1.45 rating in terms of its scaling with firearms. So what this essentially means is that per point of firearm, this weapon will gain less per bullet damage than the AUG or the Vector will. But in my view, that really doesn't matter, because if we're talking about an extra 200 RPM, that's just massive. And also, we're really not stacking that much firearms these days, to be honest with you. We're really, the meta is pushing us towards tankiness. We're running 2-2-2 balance builds, you know, where we're getting our damage from other sources. We're not getting our damage by stacking on massive amounts of firearms. We're making sure that we have the right amount of crit, the right weapon mods, you know, that we have all these things in place, rather than just blindly stacking on firearms like we would if we were just going after glass cannon builds. If we were in sort of like a glass cannon meta, where everyone was just stacking firearms for days, and I'd say, yeah, cool, probably the AUG and the Vector would actually still be better weapons because of that scaling. But I think on balance, the MP7 is actually the best weapon that we're going to be able to run with at the moment. Now, one thing to note, of course, that's very important is that there are new weapons being introduced in the expansion. So the whole, like, this is the best weapon in inverted commas, that could absolutely change. So watch this space. I will definitely be doing more videos on that if that's the case. But for now, if you want to know which one is the top of the pile based on the current group of weapons, then I'm going to say this is the one to go for. So that's it, guys. That's the breakdown of what this nerf is and what it means. The long story short is that your AUG and your Vector are still excellent weapons. So don't think that they're trashed here. They're absolutely not. They are just less effective than they used to be. And I do think that the MP7 has now become the weapon of choice for the SMG class. And if you can get your hands on a well-rolled one of those, then you should absolutely do it. Guys, I've got a whole bunch of videos coming out in the next little while about the patch and all the changes that are being made. So stick around for those. If you like this video, please drop it a like, as it does help grow my channel. If you haven't yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button now, and you'll hear plenty more from me over the coming weeks and months. Take good care, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the Dark Zone. Bye-bye.